Hey there, are you ready? Because today is the day when you start figuring out how to create a home you love right now with what you already have and in the home you're currently living in. I'm Sandra, your host of the Style Matters podcast, brought to you by Little Yellow Couch. And I truly believe that you should not put off living inside something beautiful and energizing and nurturing for some imaginary perfect time in your life. You need those things now. And to help you get started, go download our free guide that'll help you clarify what your style actually is. Now, I'm not talking about identifying a style category like farmhouse or boho. I'm talking about nailing down something specific and wholly unique to who you are. And at the end of the guide, I'll give you next steps on how to start putting that style to work. To get it, just go to littleyellowcouch.com and click on the yellow button right at the top. So welcome to Little Yellow Couch and the Style Matters podcast. This community of listeners is your people. You found us, and I am so glad you're here. Before we get started, here's a word about today's sponsor. Annie's Kit Clubs enable you to add handcrafted elements to your home with everything delivered to your door. They specialize in DIY crochet, knit, and sewing projects, and they also have DIY kits made just for kids. Kits are beginner-friendly, but also range into every skill level. And I love the pacing of their projects. You just do a little at a time so that a big project, like an Afghan or a quilt, doesn't feel so overwhelming. With each kit, you have access to a fabulous online library of patterns and directions, taking you step by step through your projects. And here's the best part. Annie's is offering listeners of this podcast 75% off the first month of a kit subscription. Yep, that's right, 75% off your first month using promo code StyleMatters75. And you can use it on any monthly subscription. Just go to annieskitclubs.com and use the code StyleMatters75. And 75 is the numeral 75. You don't write it out. Again, that's annieskitclubs.com and use StyleMatters75 at checkout. All right, let's jump into today's episode. I love how serendipity works. Several months ago, I stayed at the Cornell Inn in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And as I often do, I was choosing hotels based on their designs. And for this one, I was particularly enamored with the fact that the owners were collaborating with the Kaleidoscope Project, which is a design think tank, if you will. Their mission is to amplify the voices of designers from a diverse array of backgrounds, in particular offering a showcase for designers of color. So every room in the inn was created by a different designer, including the restaurant and the bar. The photos are fabulous. They will be on the show notes page. You have to check it out. But as I was scrolling through the room photos, I stopped dead in my tracks for one room in particular. So I called the inn and I requested it. And I said, you have to make sure that's the room I want to be in. And it was even better in person. And wait till you see the bathroom. Anyway, fast forward several months and I'm just scrolling through House Beautiful magazine, and they had an article about their next wave designers, which is where they really highlight new up and coming designers. And there was a photo of the room that I stayed in. So I looked up the designer who was mentioned right there, and I told her I had to talk with her about her work. So this is the conversation that followed with the lovely Rydhima Brar. Her studio, called Terior, is based in Los Angeles, and she has a fascinating story about how she grew up in Kuwait leading up to the Gulf War and has been reinventing herself ever since. So we talk about that, along with her, where her inspiration comes from. Sometimes it's from cocktails. And we also talk about that wondrous hotel room that I stayed in that has her handprints all over it. Here's Rydhima. Rydhima Brar, welcome to the Style Matters podcast. I've been dying to have you on. I know you just had a baby, so congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I found you because you were part of House Beautiful's Next Wave. Once I took a look at your website, you really piqued my curiosity with something you said, which is you talked about how the best things in life often come from the need to rebuild or change or grow, and meaning after something challenging or even devastating might have happened, and that different periods of reincarnation, reinvention that you've gone through personally have actually affected how you see and create design. So I really want to know, what's the backstory? What tell us about your journey?
Thank you. So those are some very true emotions that I've felt from the very beginning. Even when I had put my website together, those were literally some of the words and the keywords that jumped right at me were rebuild, reincarnation, rebirth. And so it goes back all the way to a little bit about my background. I was, born and raised in Kuwait in the Middle East.
Yep.
I'm Indian by heritage. And so my father moved there, in the mid 70s to start his life, his career, and we lived a very, very, happy, comfortable life up until the Gulf War hit. And so it all happened overnight. And so I have very vivid memories of, the first few days of, when we were informed. Around that time, I was in the first or second grade.
Wow.
And so, it's a weekend, we're all sleeping in, and the next thing I wake up and my parents are like running around. They woke up early in the morning, went to the grocery store, and like the house is just getting packed with all of these supplies. And so I just walk out wondering what's going on.
Sure.
And they sort of didn't explain it to me right away, because they're like, something is going on right now. Just go back to sleep. Don't worry. We have a big picnic coming up, kind of thing.
Well, I'm sure you know how it is when your kids are that young. You do need some time to think about how you're going to tell them and how much you're going to tell them. And
yes,
it's
exactly
very stressful. Okay, cool. Keep going.
It is. And so, I just sort of went back and I started to play with my toys and things. And I have an older sister as well. And so she was with me, and she figured, she's 8 years older than I am. And so she had a better understanding of what was going on, but she was helping my parents and she was trying to keep me calm.
Yeah.
And then finally, later on, I was told that this is what's happened. So we have no school, nothing is going to go, we're going to be at home for a little bit. So anyways, fast forward, we were there for a couple of months. And, in that time frame, I remember my father trying to figure out what we're going to do. Both my parents trying to figure out what we're going to do. We had our close set of family friends. We're all sitting and trying to figure out, what the next step is.
Yeah.
And it was scary to sort of, have sort of listen to that conversation, even from the back end as we're running around and playing. But yes, okay, we all have to go back to India or the US or London, wherever, most of their family friends were visiting. Most of our family friends had relatives and family back.
Right.
And so in our case, we were going to go to India. And so we were literally coming up with an escape plan and things like that. And so, we make our way from it. That was a whole process. I mean, I can probably talk about that at a separate time.
Okay.
But, we sort of sneaked into Iraq. And then from Iraq, we went to Jordan, from Jordan to Dubai. And then finally, we were on the first plane out to India. Wow. So that was a whole process. And so we moved to India and sort of, had, again, kind of wondering, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And
I mean, you hadn't even known India because you were born in Kuwait.
Yes, I was born in Kuwait. I'd only visited India in summer vacations and things like that. And
you had?
For me, my roots were still home in Kuwait.
Okay.
Like, India was a vacation spot.
Okay.
And so my father had to figure out, because he's in business. He was in business back there in the construction world. And so for him too, it's like everything is left behind. What do we do?
Yeah. So
that was like the first time he had to sort of rebuild and start everything ground up. And so we all experienced that in the whole process of it. We were there for a couple of years. And then finally, when Kuwait opened up, my father decided to go back because, again, he was familiar with the place. He loved, we all loved living there. And that was home, basically, for us. So we all moved back home. and then again sort of started ground up, because when we went back, we only had our home to us. That's it. Everything else was gone, nothing left behind, basically. So you sort of started ground up again when we after the Gulf War, when we moved back to Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, we sort of experienced that resurgence of, okay, we're starting ground up, both friend circle, family, school, career, jobs, everything was sort of starting ground up.
Yeah.
And then from there, and so these have been some of the two big moments in my early childhood life that I'd experienced as far as, rebuilding and rebirth. And then later on, much later in life, I, in the Middle East at that time, you graduate from high school, and usually for expats, the university and higher education options were limited.
Okay.
And so we would the norm or the trend was all of us would, be there until 12th grade, and then we all leave and move to wherever we have, wherever we desire, or wherever our families choose and have us go for further education.
Okay.
Same thing. India, Australia, UK, wherever you want to go. And so, for instance, my sister went to India for further education. But in my case, I did not want to go to India. And so the family and all of us, we decided I would come into the US for my education.
Okay.
And so again, at that point, at the age, this is like 17 years old or so, you sort of leave everything, leave a very comfortable, cushy, sheltered life.
Yes.
Where literally I barely must have spent maybe 2 nights away from home, to suddenly a new country, city. And here you are sitting in the dorms, first week all alone. And I remember calling my sister and asking her, hey, how do I, work this laundry machine? I was like, what is a quarter?
No.
Gosh. So you're starting ground up again,
yes.
and, making new friends, trying to figure your way around, getting onto the bus. I remember vividly getting onto the shuttle, trying to find my first class.
So where were you? What part of the country?
Oh, so I went from the nice hot deserts of Kuwait to the cold winters of Buffalo, New York.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow.
Yes.
That is shock to the system. Okay.
Yes, exactly. And then from there, moved to Philadelphia to get, first job out of college. And then from there to the Bay Area. I was in the corporate side of things for a very long time. For the first 10 years of my career, I did marketing and product management. And again, same thing. This pattern sort of repeated itself, where I moved to Philadelphia, then I moved to San Francisco all by myself, starting ground up, and building my network, building my foundation, my base. And so the final move was when I moved here to LA after I got married. And I would say the big sort of quote unquote rebirth, reincarnation moment again was the birth of my first daughter.
Oh, wow.
And it was a tough sort of road, a tough path to, getting pregnant. I underwent IVF and, it all was successful. But then, just like my second daughter, my first one also came early. She came 8 weeks early.
Wow.
And so she was literally, 30 weeks or so when she was born. She was 2 pounds, 6 ounces when she was born. I was in the hospital for a month prior to that. And
wow.
There was a long NICU stay. And so at that point, there was, again, a lot of upheaval and change in my life in a different way. We were expecting things to go one way, but then things happened a whole nother way.
Right.
And, you're in general reborn as a mother.
Right. I agree. Totally. It's, you have no idea until it actually happens.
You think
you do,
No.
You think you have an idea. You have no idea the depth of feeling that you're going to have, and the depth of responsibility that you feel. And
Yes, exactly. And add to that, the anxiety of having a preemie, where you're just not prepared for it in any shape or form,
Right.
But it was during that phase, that time when I decided to quit my full-time, work and career, everything, and just to be at home for a year. And that was when design, in a way, my Elle decors and my AD magazines and things like that sort of were my distraction. When I did my place, for instance, there was a lot of a story that I was trying to tell, which was, okay, we have this gorgeous place. I want the mid-century modern style, contemporary pieces here and there, a little bit of an eclectic feel, but I want to tell my story. So, there were some heirloom pieces from my family, from my mother's side, some pieces from Kuwait, which are very traditional to the Kuwaiti heritage that I just, sort of sprinkled around the house. And when we were entertaining and having friends and family over, those pieces ended up being conversation starters.
Of course, yes.
And so when I decided to pursue this route, after the birth of my daughter, I'm like, all right, I don't want to go back to my corporate life anymore. I think this is what I want to do. That was sort of the ethos that I took with me. And with that, was again the rebirth, reincarnation that started off my design journey in a way. Yeah. So here we are.
Here we are. And the other thing that you talk a lot about is your approach. It is very artistic. I think that because maybe you did not go to design school, you don't have the curse of knowing all of the technical stuff. I mean, I'm sure you've picked it all up,
yes.
as we do on the job.
As we do on the job, yeah.
But I mean, when you're first starting, you are coming at it, I think, my impression, from a very open, emotional standpoint, and you are able to immerse yourself in the story of a client, and you seem to innately understand that that's the most important part, and it is the most important part is the story. And the other stuff, all the stuff like what size rug to buy and how low do you hang the chandelier and all of those things, that's the easy part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Right.
That's the easy part, and that's the stuff you can Google. Right now there is a plethora of information out there when it comes to those technical elements or so. And so, yes, a lot of that is self-taught, but you're right. In my case, because of my global upbringing and that sort of influences my work in a different way. And again, Kuwait was very expat friendly and is very expat friendly. Mm-hmm. And so even when I grew up, I was surrounded by diverse cultural elements, unique stories from all of these people that we would come across. We're all in this one place. There was a lot of multicultural, diverse elements there, festivals, celebrations, things that I was exposed to that I normally wouldn't have, because everybody has their own traditions, their own things that they do. Everybody wanted to show or, have some way to present themselves, their backgrounds, their heritage in some shape or form in their home. It made a huge impression. And so because of that, even now when I look at, fabric, textiles, or any statement pieces or anything, there's always some sort of a way I'm trying to connect the dots, and I'm trying to figure out what's the story I can tell with this.
Well, we're going to dig into that. So you have, to come to the attention of House Beautiful and the Next Wave designer platform, that's incredible that how fast that you've done that.
Thank you.
But when you look at your designs, they're different. This is what I love about they're different. They're not like everybody else's. And so that's always important to me when I figure out who's going to be a guest on the show. Mm-hmm. So let's dig into that approach. I would love it if, and I know this is hard to articulate because it clearly is intuitive to you, but talk about this process. You've got the inspiration, and then you translate it into design details, design choices. So for example, one of my favorite projects of yours is this home where the inspiration apparently was a hotel, the Santa Monica Proper Hotel, and a martini, a Vesper martini, which we'll talk about cocktails later. But you were using those two things as your inspiration for this beach house. So can you walk us through what goes on in your mind?
When a client reaches out to me and we start talking about what it is that they've reached out to me for, right? Most of the time it starts out with, hey, we either moved into a house or we bought a house, we've lived here. But as we keep going further, there are questions like, what are your favorite movies or, TV shows? What's your favorite cocktail? Name a favorite restaurant or any other space, as I mentioned earlier, that you love. You just love to go to because it makes you feel a certain way. Any of those places that you want to sort of recreate or, you get inspiration from, so that we can immerse your space with that experience. And so those are the questions sometimes that get very difficult for the client to answer as well.
Right, right.
Because it takes them a minute or two. So that's why it's in a detailed questionnaire. But I'm like, take your time with this. You don't have to get back to me within 24 hours, but really think about this. And it could be anything. It could be the restaurant, your favorite restaurant, as I mentioned. It could be the lobby of a hotel. It could be an art gallery.
Yeah.
For all I care, any place, or it could be this one street that you walked down when you were visiting Scotland or something like that.
I love that you encourage people to think about spaces that aren't necessarily somebody else's home. Like I love that you don't say, well, who's your favorite celebrity home?
Yes,
because you don't want to hear that.
You don't want to hear that. And many times clients do, if that's what they respond to me back with, that's fine. That's totally fine. I'll take that as my, my source of inspiration. But normally I try to sort of, not encourage that. It's more about, tell me what really makes you feel happy or any memory that you've had in the past, because I want to trigger that emotion in that space. That's the ultimate goal that I have in my design, is how can I trigger a very, very specific emotion that you have loved and you feel good about in your own space. And in the process of them explaining something to me about a trip that they took or a place that they visited, there are things that I pick up on, because it's like, oh, I really love this dive bar down the street. Oh, that's great. Tell me a little bit more about it. What is it about that space that you love? The colors, the textures, the feel, the music. Yeah. And then sometimes they're like, oh, it has this cool neon art. All right. Do you want to incorporate some neon art in your space? Oh, I never thought of it that way. Would it work? Absolutely. Why not? And then it turns into something custom. We end up with something so unique, even though the source of inspiration was a particular place.
Yes.
And so that's what makes the conversation exciting. And then sometimes it comes down to something as simple as, tell me what's your favorite drink, cocktail, or alcoholic, non-alcoholic, whatever it is.
Right.
What's the thing you love the most? And at that point, sometimes I get instant answers. Oh, I love scotch, or I love a martini, or, here, depending on what their choice is. And then from there, I start drawing a few elements. I'm like, so, if you're talking about a Vespa martini, my initial impression is James Bond, or sexy, classy, elegant, a little bit of that broody sort of attitude in there. So is that sort of the personality and vibe you want in your space? And then some, you see their face light up.
Right.
Like, yeah, that would be a cool, vibe to have in my space. I'm like, all right, there we go. We're going somewhere with this now.
I have two questions, one personal, but first, you have this series on your blog that I really love, Cocktails and Interiors, it's called. And you basically, you highlight one particular cocktail, and then you show us 3 or 4 different types of rooms that you feel connect to that cocktail. And to me, that is such a good illustrative way to show us this idea of connecting the dots between inspiration and design. So can you pick one of your favorites?
So my favorite is the very first post that I did, which was lavender old fashioned. It's interesting because the idea had been brewing in my head for a long time, pun intended.
No, right.
In terms of, how a particular drink or even a food item for that matter, it could be anything, can really sort of, inspire or be a source of inspiration for a particular space, and or vice versa. And so I sort of started with that. And that is literally one of the questions I have as I mentioned in my questionnaire.
Okay.
And just a little, sort of a tidbit out there is, even now when I finish off my projects, my final gift or send off to my client is a cocktail inspired by their interior. And so
a new one that you've kind of put together.
Yeah, a new one that I put together.
Wow.
And it's like again, it goes with the theme of their space.
Yes.
And of course, the base spirits are the ones that the clients love. So I get that information ahead of time from them. So the base spirit is what they love. And then, come up with a twist on something that already exists.
It's like giving them their own house specialty. Like this is this cocktail of the house. I love it.
This is the house, exactly. So coming back to this.
Yeah, lavender old fashioned.
So the most immediate reaction I had to it was, when I had it for the very first time, was such a brilliant twist, on a very old classic. Okay. You have the old fashioned, which is bitter to some, but it's got this depth with its color and flavor. But then you add a little bit of lavender, a hint of lavender in it, which just, balances it out and gives it a very good feminine, masculine sort of a balance right then and there, The whiskey, along with the lavender infused syrup or whatever it is, it just creates this, it's like a nice little twist where it creates feminine playfulness, some flirtatiousness in there. But then there's a mystery to me. There's a mystery, that you're just what is this taste? And it's so interesting, it plays with your palate and you're like, what is happening here? And so now if you were to translate that into a space, personally, I tend to gravitate a lot to these dark and moody spaces. And many times I tend to lean towards a little bit more of some of the masculine colors in general, but then I love to play with the accessories or the other textures and other elements that are a little bit more feminine.
Right.
So the way I thought of it initially was, like every cocktail, for instance, every ingredient plays a very specific role that you sort of get a feel of in the final creation. The quality of each ingredient is very noticeable. And it's sort of, in a way, again, if you were to refer to the ingredient as specific items in a specific space, the goal is for every single ingredient / item to elevate the entire cocktail / design. And then cocktails are all about layering as well. Craft cocktails specifically, right? Each element interacts with one another in different ways, and the way they blend with each other, the fragrance of one with the taste of the other. Again, layering is a big part of design as well.
Yes.
And then finally you have the beauty of it all, when it all comes together, and then you have your finishing touches, whether it's, a cherry on the top or lavender or orange or whatever it is that you have right on the top, but all of it put together in this gorgeous glass that you get made specifically for that cocktail. Similarly, with the design, all of the whole glass is the entire space, or the home, the shell of the space. And so it's about that whole experience, right? It's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an experience that, you're breathing in, you're tasting, you're, very experiential in a way.
Yeah. Very immersive. Yeah.
Very immersive. Yes, that's the word. Very immersive. And it really touches every sense, all of your senses. And that's exactly how I feel about interiors, and it's every time I've been to restaurants, myself, or bars, I feel like it has impacted me in the cocktail I choose. In a strange way.
The environment does, yes.
The environment does, because if I'm going to a speakeasy, then I go for the dark and moody lavender, old-fashioned type of drink. But when I've gone to a preppy, like a lounge or a bar or a girls' night, and you're like bright colors are surrounded by you, then I go for a flirty cocktail. It could be like a martini or a Cosmo or something, just to be like, oh, something playful. And in subconsciously, you don't realize it has impacted you in the way you feel, and you're going to an elegant fine dining restaurant. You're like, no, I don't want to do anything heavy. I want a really, really good, a nice fine glass of wine.
Right.
And I'm sure you felt the same way, depending on where you've gone.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, yeah.
All right. We have to talk about the room that you designed for the Cornell Inn in the Berkshires. So I live in Massachusetts on the east side, Boston. The Berkshires, for those of you who don't know, is this little enclave of towns with the Berkshire Mountains in the west side of Massachusetts, and it's kind of artsy. It's country. It's wealthy, and it's beautiful. It's rolling hills. It's beautiful. So it's definitely a vacation destination. And so I'm planning a weekend getaway. And I chose this inn because on their website, it talked about how each room was designed by a different designer. So immediately my spidey senses are tingling. And then, so I'm looking through the website and I see photos of the bedroom that you created and the bathroom. And I just stopped in my tracks and I said, that's the one. And I called them up and I had this lovely woman on the other end. And I didn't know the name of the room. So I'm trying to describe it. She's like, oh, I know which one you're talking about. Yes, let's make sure that you definitely get in that room. And I don't know which I like more, the bathroom or the bedroom. I mean, the bathroom is phenomenal. I can't wait for everyone to see photos of this on the show notes page of this episode. First, I would love it if you could describe it for us and then tell us about the Kaleidoscope Project, which I believe was some sort of umbrella concept that that this hotel used to bring together all these designers.
Yeah. So let me start with that first.
Okay.
So the Kaleidoscope Project was born out of a conversation between some of these design leaders, Amy Lynn Schwartzbard, Patty Carpenter, Liz Nightingale. They wanted to recognize or they sort of even felt that there was some sort of inequity in the design industry as well.
Yeah.
And they wanted to take some action and do their part. And so they turned their frustration into this amazing mission and came up with this whole concept of this unprecedented show house type event. So the owner of the inn had just bought the place, and he was looking for a designer to do the place up, because the inn was, built in the 1800s.
Right.
So,
it's beautifully old, historic. It's just exactly what you expect in the Berkshires.
Exactly. And gorgeous place. And so, obviously he wants to bring in the right designer for the space. And as he was, looking through, the local community, that's where Amy Lynch Wordsworth came into picture. And so when she visited the place, she saw everything, and it just, that was when the idea was born. And so it turned into this whole thing of, why don't we invite, 21 designers of color to do this place? And that was the concept of, let's kind of, twist this show house concept where we can have all of these designers do one room each and give them the freedom to do as they please, with the design.
Yes.
The goal was to show the true colors that are present, within the community, and to create like welcoming and inclusive spaces that sort of reflect their design narrative, that reflect their background, that reflect their story in a way. And
and I love how different all of the rooms are. I mean, there's this bar, there's the dining room that's separate from the bar, and then there are all the different bedrooms. I mean, each room, it has its own very distinct personality.
Exactly. Very differently. Every room has literally the designer's own personality show a different way. And then I show up a week before the show house is about to open, like the opening day, because we were all slotted with our install days. Okay. And so I show up literally a week before, and, we had our make it work moments. You show up and it looked gorgeous, but at the same time, there was so much work that still had to be done. Some of the things were not done the way they were supposed to be done in my head. And then right then you're like, all right, I have 3 days to figure this stuff out. So, as Tim Gunn would say, make it work. And in that 1 week, all of the designers were also physically there. Everybody's running around trying to get their space together.
Yeah.
It had become like this fun little dorm sort of environment, where we are knocking on each other's doors. We're like, hey, do you have tape? Do you have a paintbrush? Do you have this? This broke in my room and I need help. Do you have scissors?
Oh, it sounds like fun. It sounds really fun. Yes.
And in an instant, we all just got to know each other. We were all helping each other out. We were trying to get each other's rooms, complete.
What a great experience.
Yeah. And in that process, as I got to know different designers, when I went to their spaces, I could see it. I'm like, oh, I can totally see you over here. And then a lot of the people who did not know me, sort of, they walk into my room and they see me and they're like, oh, yeah, we can see where this is coming from.
Oh, that's great.
And so coming back to my room now, your second question, as you were in it, you could see it was weird. It was a pentagon, like it had 5 walls.
Right.
And it was one of the weird rooms like that had 5 walls. And so that itself was the first challenge. And second of all, it had these ginormous windows on every, 2 big windows. And it was the first room when you enter the inn. So if you remember, you're directly facing the street. Mm-hmm. So the moment when I saw the pictures and the plans, I was like, okay, privacy is going to be number 1 over here.
Absolutely.
And I knew, so right off the bat, I knew drapes was going to play a huge role. Drapery was going to play a huge role in my space. And then as I was thinking about, okay, again, what do I want to do with this space? You think of the Berkshires. I had never visited the Berkshires, like you said. So I'm Googling photos and images and I'm trying to look at, what the place is like. And so I get this feel of like, okay, it's a beautiful vacation spot. People, are traveling all the way here to get away from whatever life it is, right? You want to really enjoy and experience every moment of it. And so it was that whole, the description of, I came up with was, this is going to be the Empress's quarters. And that inspiration came from Kuwait and India and the background that I have, where it's like, okay, how can this person be treated as a prince or a princess or a king and a queen?
Yes.
So when they are, at the end of the day, you go sightseeing, you go hiking, you go whatever it is you're doing, but at the end of the day, you come home and you're retrieving back into this fancy quarters of yours.
Yes.
And that is the emotion I wanted to evoke, where you feel extremely luxurious when you walk into the space. You feel like, wow, I am the queen, or I'm king. And
yes, again, you accomplished that. You definitely accomplished that.
And if you look back at historic photos of, these kings and queens quarters and stuff, the first thing you see are gorgeous drapery. You see like long long lengths of fabric and all of that everywhere, around the space right off the bat. And then you have these
Absolutely.
beautiful rugs on the floor. Now, with this place, for instance, with the Berkshires, we couldn't, the floors were original
Yep.
from when they were made. So we were not going to touch the floors. We were not going to touch the fireplace. And so that's kind of where the whole vibe, and you must have noticed the pillows that were there on my chairs.
Of course.
That was the quirkiness that I had to bring into the space with the Indian version of, Princess Leia and Rey from
Right.
Star
The
Wars.
empresses. Yes,
The
exactly.
empresses, exactly. The very powerful empresses, but cool at the same time.
Right, right.
And then, as you mentioned, the bathroom. The
Oh,
bathroom to me was such a jewel box of a moment. And I'd been dying to do something, a small space with huge impact. What can I do?
yes. Oh,
Bathroom in a way, the powder room or bathroom in a way is again, would sort of tell you my story. The wallpaper was custom handmade by Gracie Wallpaper. It was this Indian scenery with monuments from, where I grew up.
I didn't realize it was custom. Oh
custom.
For that room. Oh my gosh. The wallpaper alone is worth staying at this hotel in that room. The wallpaper alone, people.
Yes.
I'm not kidding.
Yes, it beautifully done. And because I was like, I want this to be inspired by the Mughal Empire, the Mughal times. But I wanted to have, a fun vibe to it. I don't want it to be too traditional. It has to have some modern elements in it. So
Right.
So the color palette of the wallpaper is where that came from, where it's the majority of it is the black and white space, but you have these pops of color and it tells a story, from this Mughal time. And then the tile was from one of the vendors, Acto, one of our tile vendors, who came in at the very last minute, by the way, and saved the day. And literally, I see this tile, and to me, it's got that Moroccan feel and vibe, and it had the colors that I love. Again, texture, the marble with the stone, all of these different elements.
And then the lighting fixtures in the bathroom are fantastic. I mean, I love the contrast. These very modern lights
pieces,
with this Mughal Empire background. Tell us about why did you choose that?
So the lighting, again, they were all, again, one of the sponsors for us, Blueprint Lighting. They were one of our sponsors and very generous sponsors, might I say. And they had these options of, customizing the light fixtures to whatever color and they have this, again, a huge range of colors. And so for me, again, we have this beautiful bathroom. It's a statement bathroom by itself. Initially, so this was by the way, one of those make it work moments. Basically, I thought I had the option of having the fixture on the ceiling, but once I arrived there, due to various reasons explained by the contractor, we couldn't have a light fixture on the ceiling.
Oh, interesting.
So I was like, and we had to just use the one that was basically there, and it had to be a plain, one of the plain lights that you have in regular bathrooms. I couldn't have my fancy fixture. I'm like, well, the fixture is like the accessory in the bathroom. It's like the jewelry piece over here. I'm not, right. I have to find a way to make this work. And so that was when we, literally transformed that and all right, this is going to go onto the wall. And I'm going to convert this into a vanity light, and it's going to be big. It's going to be bold, but it's going to work. I'm going to make it work. And so the mirror, which was supposed to be installed vertically, was installed horizontally.
Okay.
If you notice, the colors in the bathroom were all very masculine in a way, right? The colors were very masculine, the blues, the grays, the whites. And so this color, this fixture of mine, which is a bright reddish orange, was the pop. It was the feminine twist and bringing the energy into the space, And so again, my goal was, you enter the bathroom and you don't want to leave it.
Yeah, I did not want to leave. Rydhima, I'm going to have you on the show again because there's still so much we haven't even talked about. And that heritage piece is one of them. And you had a beautiful post about it on your blog. And I would like to help people kind of figure out how to bring that element into, your culture, your heritage, and even as you say, mix it. Your husband is Punjabi. He's has different cultural traditions. I mean, and most of us do. Well, I shouldn't say that. Many of us do marry someone that is from a different background, and so therefore you do need to meld things, and then you create something wholly new, which is what you're doing with your children. So, I would love to have you back on again because there's more that we need to talk about. But I do want to wrap up now. Asking you, why does style matter? I'm so curious as to how you're going to answer this question.
So style to me, and to many folks probably, is huge reflection or representation of who you are, right? When you think of style from a fashion perspective, it depicts in many ways so many things about you. just in that same manner, when you are to translate that to interiors, in many ways, I define my aesthetic as, creating a contemporary space, but something that juxtaposes, with eclectic luxe environment that is both editorial yet comfortable. That's kind of how I sort of explain when somebody asks me, what is your style? Or what is your design style in many ways? And so these elements, in many cases, they seem very contradictory, right? But at the same time, when you combine these unexpected elements, which is what you'll see in my work, it's all to mold very specific feeling. There's so many different emotions that come in the space, colors, feelings, functionalities that you're trying to bring. So to me, style is an amalgamation of all of these things that really puts together sort of an all-encompassing way to really sort of emphasize and magnify those feelings that you're trying to evoke in that space.
I love what you said about the spaces that you design. You want them to be experienced. And I think that's really at the core of what we've been talking about this whole conversation is the breadth of the experience. They're not just visual. It's not just these rooms that you've designed are not just about showing up in a magazine, which is two-dimensional and only visual. You're layering the experience of touch and scent and taste with the cocktails and the visual, of course, sound, what music is playing, that kind of thing. And again, immersive, that's another word we've used during this conversation.
Exactly,
and yes, I love it. I do feel transported by your designs. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I hope that was helpful and inspiring. Do check out our website, littleyellowcouch.com, where you can see photos and links from this episode, learn about my slow style approach to design, and grab your free style guide to get you started on your signature style today. Have a great week. Bye for now.